Welcome back to our lecture series on Module 3 Software Design. So we are already now on architectural design. So in reality, these different types of software design are actually being worked by different types of people. However, in software engineering, since we are still uh, preparing for the real world, so that's why we try to learn this different stuff, and I hope that this would be very helpful to in really finding which type of software engineering work or which type of work uh, really fits your heart, your desires, so for example you can start focusing on database design because you feel you have an affinity to it. So however, if there are instances that you think that uh, let's say that your heart is not really into this data design, you find it complicated, you find it hard to do, uh, uh, please don't worry too much. The field of software engineering is very vast, so you can try other fields so that you think you have the strength, and pursue it, so it doesn't matter, in the future, that you are failing on this stuff. Just find your niche in this field of software engineering. So I guess this is one of the exciting part. Okay, we are getting closer to reality. We're getting closer to coding already. So we are still here to be able to understand software design, so we can capture technical information through various forms of software modeling. So, and now our goal is to be able to explain concepts in architectural design. So this is quite long, no? However, just give time, to understand the levels of complexity, the differences, and really these things, are um, might not be common, in a way that once this is established, it is what it is. So that's why in software design we must collaborate, in a real world setting. You need to do a study, you need to do a research to really create this architectural design that is ripe for implementation. So because, such as for example, if you're going to build or construct a building, no you don't just change the blueprint, out of a whim, when the building is already constructed. So all of the stakeholders, the key stakeholders would sign the blueprint and say, this is the final design, this is the design that will be implemented or constructed. So that's the same with uh, architectural design. So I guess this is one of the topic that I have a strong affinity into because I have an experience into this, and it brings back memories, uh, when working in the industry years ago. So we'll be talking about concepts, the difference between software and system architecture, and how do real world architectural designs look like. So let's begin again with the connections between our analysis model and our design model. So the most important pie in the analysis model for our architectural design would be the data flow diagram. So I hope you collaborated well with your client and also your partner, if you have any, and try to really understand which processes consumes or generate this data, because that would be very helpful into architectural design. So as you can see, we cannot really create an architectural design if we don't have data design. So this is a pyramid, whichever is on the lower level supports those that are on top. So that's why we start with the data design. We make sure it is close to its final form, have it approved, then we proceed with the architectural design. And then we go into these other layers as well. Okay, so when we talk about architectural design, so this is the initial design process, no? And of course, it is also iterative. It doesn't mean that overnight you can create your final architectural design. So of course, that evolves again through collaboration, through another series of analysis. So the work in both analysis and uh, software design is iterative. No? And here you establish the framework for control, non-communication, by defining the interfaces that enable that data flow. So that sounds very bookish, no? However, that would be best explained through more pictures, more diagrams later on. So how do we create an architectural design? So again, we go back to our data flow diagram. So in data flow diagram, again, it talks about which processes consumes which data and which data are generated by this specific process. No, and which entity are initiating it. So basically, the first step of architectural design is the creation of the DFD itself. No, you create the DFD by establishing the information flow. You create the boundaries. No, so that would be the step one for architectural design. Then the next step is to translate this DFD to convert this into initial program structures. So now we know that this specific process supports this specific feature, this specific use case, diba? In our previous topics, we covered use case diagram, no use case scenario. So basically, all of the things that we've covered fit into our succeeding topics because we need those things to be able to continue. So now that we already understand the initial form of our system, the initial form of our program, no, as we can imagine it, no, so we apply structural partitioning. So if you can remember horizontal and vertical partitioning, so on top is our core system or the whole system in general. Then we break down it to different modules. So we apply modularization. No, so basically the first level, the first branches are our modules or our use cases. So it depends on how we decompose this specific project. And down to the next level, no, for each branch. So we can break down it into further different components. So for example, let's imagine uh, Facebook again, for example, no. So we have our module for posting, no, specific for posting contents, no. One module for viewing contents, no, it can be a video. Then a separate module for newsfeed, specific to textual contents. Then we have marketplace settings is a separate module. You have Facebook dating. You have uh, groups. No, you have pages, and those are broken into different modules. Then underneath there are different components as well that supports those modules. And maybe in the background node there are certain utilities, certain components that are used by those modules itself. So I hope you can remember or visualize again how structural partitioning uh, basically looks like, no. So it's very important for software engineers to be able to visualize these things, no, even if it is not yet written on paper. So number four, so again, this is still the initial process, no? So we keep on refining our design based on existing principles and heuristics. So mind you, so these principles and heuristics are evolving, no? Uh, for each generation maybe. So uh, there might be new uh, best practices. However, just stick, no, to which things are relevant for this generation, for example. So when we create an architectural model, so it is just a simplistic representation of the proposed system, no? So we can never have 100% accurate representation of the software that we are going to implement, no? Or if you're saying, sir, there is 100% accurate representation, and that's the software itself, no? To be able to create a model, know that we can share, no? No, because we are going to analyze this model, we are going to use this as a means to communicate with our client, with the analyst, no, and with the developers, with the testers. So it should be a simplified model. So I placed this visual here, but an architectural model is not limited to graphical representation. So you can have a textual, no, representation, you can have a tree-like structure or whatever. But one of the most common architectural are visual models, visual representations, because it is easier to understand by most people. So let's continue with software architecture. So when we talk about software architecture, it's more focused on the software itself, not the things that are written by programmers, no, by written by developers. So which components are being used, what are their interaction, and what is the best, no, structure that makes these components or modules work together harmoniously and make it maintainable and also scalable. So one of the most basic and maybe early form of software architecture is pipe and filter architecture. So basically, it's very simple. No? If we're going to visualize this, uh, it's just like a step-by-step process. No, you feed data into one filter, it pumps out the data and feed that to another filter and repeat that, no? So this pipe and filter architecture uses filters which can combine, enrich, or transform data. So this can be particularly helpful for small utilities, for small tasks. Uh, you can, as a developer, no, you can implement this pipe and filter through procedural programming, or through functions, or maybe modules, or even separate systems. So this is the visualization. As you can see, you start with step one, pipe that data, not to the succeeding filter, and you can basically uh, code your software, no, in a way nga, if you can have conditions, no, if the data is like this, you send it to another filter instead of this one, and so on. So basically, you can visualize your software architecture on this one. So you can just replace, no, depending on the context of the project that you are proposing. So basically, these filters are, again, can be functions or modules. So you can rename these labels depending on the needs of your uh, proposed project. And this syncs here on the right side and basically the services, no, or the the final process that will display your data, or will, or maybe save your data. So it can be a database, or it can be a service of your system. So one of the most common architecture is this layered architecture. So typically common on monolithic design. So when we say monolithic design, these are software that are bundled together and deployed as one, and will work as a single application. So that's monolithic design. So basically, you have your presentation layer. It can be your UI or your interface. Then in between, you have the business logic layer, and below you have the data layer. So when you talk about business logic, so basically that's the uh, all of the codes, no, that supports your use cases, and it acts as a middleman, no, where it is the part where your UI communicates with, and the business logic communicates with the persistence layer, or whichever form of uh, storage, not that you implement. Commonly now we use databases. So that's it now for layered architecture. We'll go into deeper on this one on system architecture, where this is still applicable. Then we have this plugin architecture. So diba, if you are familiar with VS Code, where you can add extensions, uh, browsers such as Mozilla Chrome can have extensions. So basically, you have this core system which allows itself to become extended by installing plugins. No, so what's good with this one is you will be able to release a very slim, very light software. Now, where it's easy to download. It's not gigabytes worth of download. No, so maybe you only have less than 100 megabytes. No, that's common for applications right now, and you just install extensions, no, on demand or as needed. So it enables a minimal core system to be extended using installable plugins and loadable modules. So maybe you're also familiar with gaming consoles, no, where the more older one, where you plug in, no, a certain game, and you can play it. And if you want to play another game, you remove the existing card, no, and replace it with another game. So that's the physical uh, uh, older version of this plug-in architecture. Hence that name plug-in, because you need to plug it in. Then we go into more complex implementations. So we have this service-based architecture. So it looks the same with uh, layered architecture. However, for this one, your business logic layer is broken down into different services, and these services can be different uh, modules that work independently with each other. Now, however, there are instances that for each service, it might have separate UI. For each service, it might have a separate database. So it really depends, no, on the context of the project that you are proposing. And the most simplest form is this on the left side. Single UI, single database, but multiple services running independently. No, it's the UI that communicate to one of the service, and it's each service that needs to do its operation and communicate back to the database. Then we have this uh, more complex implementation, the microservices architecture. So basically, if we go back here in the service based, now the whole application is bundled all together. So basically, all of the services, all of the UI, all of the database are implemented as a single system. However, for microservices, so basically these are different deployments, no? So each set of uh, interface, service, and database are deployed uh, separately, and and most of the times, no, the your another layer of presentation or UI. It might be a website, it might be it might be a smartphone. So they will be communicating through these various API. However, no, as because there are instances where these different microservices might need to interact with each other, and it would be rather slow, no, for this implementation, no, for this deployment to interact with another using the HTTP service or through the API. So that's why they need a different type of service. Now we have this message broker. So you have, example, Kafka, or maybe depending on the context of your project. Now you have RabbitMQ for them to communicate with each other. So it's way more faster than communicating through HTTP, no, direct HTTP using these API services. So basically, the interface that you create, no, for this one are for the consumption or for the access of your clients. No, and the clients are, when I talk about clients in context to software, so it's not your client of your system, no. Those are can be a browser, a desktop application, no, a mobile application. So kana siya. So that's for microservices application. So next we move into event-driven architecture. So one pattern is orchestration. So this can be a bit complicated, no, but bear with me. So this is EDA, where you have another component which is called as an orchestrator, and it interacts, no, with this message broker. So again, this message broker is like another service that you need to integrate into your system. So you no longer have to code the operations, no, of the message broker. So you just need to integrate it into your system and a bit of uh, coding. So basically, the orchestrator, no, tells what step to do. Then after completing this step, no, it tells nga on the first step, you do this. So it's like a commander, no? So you do this, then after doing that, no, do this next. Then after doing that, do this next. So basically, the things that you placed in the message broker are just commands, no. So for example, you have this order service, no. So you have an e-commerce website. You know, the user is now done browsing the feed, no, or the display of products, and sends the request. He clicks the button, no. So a request, no, is sent to the orchestrator. So this is still again a component of your software. Then it sends a message here to comply with the order service. So the order has been uh, completed, no, the data is saved in the database. Then it it somehow, as you can see, no, it provides a response here. the order service provide a response back to the orchestrator, and it tells the orchestrator to tell the user to continue with payment. So after paying successfully, no, the payment service will fire a response again, no? It sends a message to the broker. The orchestrator will proceed with the next step, no? After completing the payment, then it will fire the shipping service, no? So basically, on an orchestrator, the steps are somewhat hard coded, no nga, nga. I will wait until this operation will be done, no? So another type of EDA is choreography. So this event-driven architecture is like uh, creating a listener, no? So you don't have uh, you don't have an orchestrator coded. However, for each service, you attach a listener. So example, with the same operation, no? Example, Lazada. So instead of having a cron job or a job that triggers this certain operation, no? From step 1, step 2, step 3. So why not attach a listener to your services? No, basically your services are just components, no, that will do specific jobs. So for example, the same operation, the customer has completed, no, his basket or his cart. He triggers it for a button, clicks the start order na process. Then it creates a message through the broker nga the user clicks the order button. Then it fires service one because service one is listening to those types of events, no? For example, button click, 'di ba? You are, if you've been working in HTML, no, and JavaScript, or even with mobile apps, so you add a listener for these different elements. So it will trigger the service, no? Then maybe it will communicate with the database. Then it will fire, no, another event that I'm done with this operation. Then these services are just basically listening in this space, no, here. So of course, if there are no relevant events happening, so it will not do anything unless there are relevant events, no, that is being listened into. So that's the time where that specific service will be triggered. Okay, so and so on. So until everything is done, no? For example, you create this special event here that once everything is done, then you provide a notification. For example, this is a notification event, no? So when siya, service tree is done, then it will point back to service again. So that would be for choreography pattern. So for modular monolithic, so this thing is more popular, no, if you are into embedded systems. So this one is, I guess I'm more familiar with this one. So you create a modular architecture. It's still monolithic, however, the components are broken down, no, depending on the type of work it is doing. And as you can see here, no, you have UI, you have an API, you have this web UI, then you have different services that performs, no, the operations requested by the user. So you can think as these services as your use cases, no? Then basically uh, these things, no, communicates depends on its access level. So for example, very common to embedded systems, no, if you're working directly with hardware, specialized hardware to support your type of software. So you need infrastructure. So you can think of infrastructure as your how will you say this? Maybe like it's somehow similar to kernel, no? Where that's your layer which manage your hardware. So your uh your memory, so that's part no kanang memory handling, uh maybe your external peripherals nga that are part of your system. Maybe if you have Bluetooth, you have Ethernet, and so on. So the infrastructure basically is the middleman, no, for your hardware, no, so that you can have your services be able to interact with it. So this is not so common. Now, for example, if you're implementing in Android, so you are no longer doing to do the hard stuff, no, because you already have the OS itself. That basically you are just creating an application on top of this firmware. Because you can think of this modular monolithic architecture as a firmware or an operating system already. So there is no universal design for this type of model, and it really depends no on how your uh, uh, what is the context, on what context of your uh, solution, no, and where to deploy it. So let me share these things lang, no, again, these services are your use cases, and these managers are just basically uh, it's like a manager for the queue, no. So for example, this service A will will create the orders, and one manager will be queuing these specific orders, then adding the logic back, the business knowledge, no, for that specific operation, and so on. Then this example, this remote bus object bus is basically just the component that allows these services to interact, no, together. So using a human readable nga nga messages. So kana siya. Then we move into system architecture. Again, software architecture is more focused on uh, which components are interacting in your software, no? Which software components are interacting with each other, and what are their relationships to each other. Then we move on to this higher dimension, no, system architecture. So this is a broader architecture. See, uh, it involves the hardware that is needed, no, for your system, for your application to work. You also have your software, the network, the physical network that allows communication through your various clients, servers, and so on. And also the very people who will be using the system itself. Now, again, there is no strict uh, rules on how to design system architecture, as long as the appropriate, no, icons are used in your design. So the icon should represent, no, which things, for example, if it is a database, so there is a common design for the database icon, for a file server, for a web server, for the internet, for the browser. Now make it clear on what icons to use, so that it does not add confusion to the people who will be reading your architectural model. So previously we talked about layered architecture. So basically you can represent your software as an n-tier architecture. However, you can also use n-tier architecture for the system itself. So it's no longer about the UI code, the business logic code, and also the database code. So in system architecture for N tier, no, so you can have two-tier architecture, the client server architecture. So again, this is just the visualization, no? So client server, and you can have a three-tier architecture. So the code is separated, no? For example, for that you have a mobile application. That mobile application would be interacting with your web application deployed into a server, and then you have another server for your database. So you can choose this simpler architectural model, or you can have this more common one. But for this one in the left side, it is more clear. For example, if your device is desktop, now you can use a laptop or a desktop. However, you change your icon if your app is a smartphone. No, you change the icon here. So as you can see, we provide this is a three-layer, three-tier architecture. You have your client, you have the specific business logic, you have to query the database, then you have your physical storage. Okay, sometimes the database is running in memory ba, and you need to save it in the physical storage. Then you fire back the response, now then a certain business logic with parse that responds and display back again to your client. So that's N tier. Then we have an older type of architecture. This one is centralized architecture. If you imagine in the previous decades, no, so you can have this mainframe server. So you can imagine the mainframe as a bigger na system unit. So it is much more powerful, no, than a single nga single CPU nga computer. So basically, it does not have a monitor by itself. So the thing that you need to do is you carry a special uh, device, no? Can be a tablet, no, or whatever, or maybe you have a thin client. So when we talk about a thin client, it's a special desktop, no, which uh, does not have uh, a higher processing speed, no. So what it does, it communicates to different computers, no, and really connect to it, to its processing. So think of it as your just a monitor ba, which you can attach to a CPU and communicate with it. So if you have this specific type of architecture where you deploy your code in a mainframe and you use these mga terminal or consoles, no, to interact with it, so that can be categorized under the centralized architecture. So the problem with this one is uh, scalability is difficult because the software is deployed on one machine, and to be able to connect to that machine you need to have physical cables, no, typically mga serial cables, older type of cables. Then this one is had gone popular, no, in 2000s, early 2000s, no. So basically you can deploy uh, your software locally, no, as long as it is connected to the local area network. So and basically this is no longer limited, no, sa local implementation. You can have your application server on a separate geographic region. No, example, it is deployed, no, sa Amazon, no, Web Services or Google Cloud and so on. So as long as the way that you are communicating through it is through a network. So you have different clients. No, it can be a desktop application. You can have a browser also, no. You can have your mobile app, no. So for example, examples of this one is Facebook, for example, uh, your bank apps, GCash, maybe you have Union Bank, you have BDO and other apps. No, basically, your app can communicate to an application server. So the clients will be requesting data from the server, and the server will provide the data. Then we have this web systems architecture. So mind the difference. So if you have a dedicated application, so like I've said, no, if it is a desktop application, if it is a mobile app application, so use client server. So a web system architecture is still a client server. However, the way that you interact as a user to this system is through a browser. So that you need a browser to visualize, no, the presentation of your application. So that's the difference between these two. Now we have this distributed system architecture. This can be very complex to set up, no? So typically you need certifications, no, for these different technologies, and you need to have internship to really learn the trade secrets, no, and how they do a layer of coding, no, to really improve how this distributed implementation uh, work in context to the problem that you are solving. So of course now we have existing uh, services which we can use not to implement this thing, but we need to hire a different person to manage, or a team who will be managing this distributed system, because this can be very complex, no, given that we need to synchronize our data to various regions every now and then. So here are the common system architecture models. So you can choose depending on the context of your project. So, so the most common one, so the generic go-to is this N-tier architecture, because it's very simple to create. So basically it's just 3 boxes or 2 boxes, and you just present it. Ma'am, sir, this is my architectural model, my system architecture. So, but we need to be more specific, no? So if you are developing a mobile application, choose a client server system architecture. But if you have a web application, I need to see that your system architecture is a web system architecture, not a client server. So I hope you get that one. Then we have distributed for more complex implementations. So these are traditional models. We've covered traditional models. However, the real world examples are becoming more complex as the consumers of our system becomes more global, no? So let's look at this example from Microsoft Azure. So if you can think about zone 1, zone 2. So basically these are different deployments, no? So basically they share common, for example, let's start with the browser, no? When you communicate to to a certain website, no, if you have, so you know that that specific website is converted into an IP address. An example for Facebook, YouTube, actually depending on the time of the day, depending on your area, your uh, the specific IP address, no, even if you are just typing facebook.com or youtube.com, the specific IP address might change from time to time. Now, for example, for the people accessing it in the Philippines or in Africa, so it might be interacting with the different IP addresses. So kana siya. But it can be very complex. How much more when you start implementing this one? No? That's why this thing is being done by a team, no? So not by a solo person. Then we have this for Discord. No, it's very high level, very simplified uh, uh, model, no? So as you can see, it's more focused on the database, on the transition, no? From one database implementation into another. So kana siya. Then for Netflix, so I need to highlight this on the top right corner, no? So they are still using MySQL for billing information. So they might be storing data to Cassandra, no, and other database. So siya. So very simplified. As long as the uh, you might not use icons, no, for this one. So you can just use basic boxes if there is no clear icon that can represent for that one. So just make sure you add labels. Now, for example, for your file storage, you use Amazon S3 and so on. So that would be all for architectural uh, models, no? So in architectural design, so your output for this one would just be a system architecture. So it's very simple. So you just go back to the slide and choose whichever is applicable to your application. So for our context, so you just choose no for client server or web system architecture. So architectural design defines the overall structure, so including the components, the interfaces, the interaction, and how information flow on either the software or the system level. Then the architectural model, no, is just the tangible representation. So it can be textual, tree-like, or visual. So representation of the software or the system that you are proposing. And this is used, no, for both analysis and communication. So again, it's an iterative process. You give back your design to your analyst, no, and the analyst will have the go signal nga this design is already okay or this design need revision. And once it's ready, then you sign it off, and that architectural model basically becomes the basis for the next steps, no, for software implementation. Then now that you have an idea on architectural model, so we need to be able to differentiate between software and system architecture. For software, it is just specific on structuring your software components and their interaction. Then for system architecture, now you are modeling the different hardware that you need, the different software that might be outside your system, but you will be using in your system, the different interfaces, the network, no, that binds your system all together, the users and the interactions of these components. So in modern architectural design, so we assume that the systems that we are developing are for globally distributed users and also the systems, no, in general. So you can have different instances of the same code base. So typically the limit are the current hardware, the software, and the networking approaches. that are available uh, in this current moment. So that would be all. So if you have any ideas, no, or if you have questions, or if you want suggestion, sir, I want this to be included in the slide. So feel free to do an evaluation. So here is the QR code and the link. So I would be happy to see more people to be adding feedback, no, both the slides and to me. So no worries, no. So I'm too old to be uh sad, no, if you have constructive criticisms. So I'm okay with that. So thank you so much and see you again on our next lecture.